Welcome back, everyone, to the eCoreAcademy e-learning platform. My name is AJay back with yet another video for you all, and today's topic is going to be on a research-based study topic in our research-based studies section on our YouTube channel or on our website at eCoreAcademy.org, whichever way you're looking through it. This video is going to be my very first video in this section. My sister Anita, she's made some excellent videos, some pre-existing videos on this given section, a lot of them having to do with U.S. history and interesting topics like the Salem witch trials. So I'm going to be continuing off of that, and I've done another personal project of mine on the causes of the Native American persecution. I'll be going through this video and showing you all the different causes having to do with the relationships that Native Americans had with the colonists during the Age of Exploration, and how these new colonists like Christopher Columbus all the way to modern day America, they've really, added to the persecution of Native Americans and taken away their thriving population. So before we get into the video, please make sure to do 4 things. Please make sure to smash that subscribe button, hit that like button on this video, turn on post notifications, and also leave a like down below. And also don't forget to share through any of our social media platforms or even through YouTube itself. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Causes of the Native American persecution during the Age of Exploration, presented by AJay. Introduction. The persecution and the decrease of the Native American population during the Age of Exploration was caused by intertribal warfare, especially during the French and Indian War, their contact with foreign European diseases upon contact with the European colonists, and disputes over land and general misunderstandings with the colonists that would all cause for their population to suffer and later decrease by almost 90%. A historical era that has featured so much prowess and success of the European counterparts of the Old World would be considered the Age of Exploration, where the New World was discovered and colonized. During this time frame that began during the early 15th century and ended during the early 17th century, Europeans, sailors, mapmakers, and explorers followed after Christopher Columbus's successful voyage to the New World. The initial aspirations of these explorers was to find trade routes through the Atlantic Ocean, directing them towards East Asia, finding riches through gold and silver, and discovering a haven for religious freedom from oppression in Europe. However, it is oftentimes overlooked that this age of exploration and the establishment of the European colonies in the New World would eventually lead to the very downfall of the indigenous peoples of this land, the fall of the Native American population. From the voyages of Christopher Columbus along with the Pinta, Nina, and Santa Maria to the island of San Salvador in the modern-day Bahamas, all the way to the establishment of the first New England colonies of the Americas, Native Americans experienced serious persecution as a result of the various wars, conflicts, and devastating diseases that waged on during this time frame. As tempers flared between major European powers, Native Americans lost countless lives and many relationships and alliances diminished during the French and Indian War, which caught the attention of many major tribes to join the sides of either the French or the British. This caused constant intertribal warfare and the breaking of alliances between tribes, which resulted in many casualties throughout the French and Indian War, along with lives lost to French and British soldiers themselves as a result. During the very arrival of the European colonists to the Americas, deadly European diseases such as smallpox and influenza were brought, which exposed the Native Americans to diseases they had no existing immunity or tolerance for. Unlike the Europeans who could recover from such illnesses, the Native Americans lost countless lives to such deadly diseases, which would diminish their population as a whole. Last but not least, Native Americans had experienced severe conflicts with the newly coming European colonists, especially in that of the east coast of modern-day United States over major land disputes. The European colonists and Native Americans had great misunderstandings in terms of culture, societal practices, and language, which caused conflict to ensue over major misunderstandings over land of which colonists had taken from the indigenous Native Americans, causing many Native Americans to be lost in skirmishes. As a result of such violence through warfare, skirmishes, land disputes, and the introduction of deadly diseases, the Native Americans would constantly become persecuted and severely decrease in population. Now on to intertribal warfare and involvement during French and Indian War. As the French and Indian Wars began, the Native Americans would join in on the conflict, break alliances, relationships, and peace by choosing opposing sides and losing many lives as a result of intertribal conflict and casualties from the European soldiers themselves. Before the arrival of the British and French settlers near the Great Lakes area and all along the Canadian border with America, the Iroquois tribes of these lands roamed these lands with central authority for over 4,000 years, in which they would experience severe violence between each of their tribes for many years at a time. In order to submerge this slaughtering and this constant violence between tribes in such close vicinity, the Iroquois tribes decided to make the Iroquois Confederacy, in which they would unite and develop a cohesive government system. This system consisted of a bicameral legislature, representatives from each of the sides known as sachems who attended Iroquois meetings, each of the tribes who attended Iroquois meetings, and a constitution saying that eternal peace shall spread to all parts of the land and that the right to land is each individual's birthright. However, as the French settlers had established their temporary trading settlements and voyagers began to make their way to the eastern parts of Canada, the British did the same in America, which caused open disputes between the two countries over territorial possessions in the New World. The British and French armies came to aid their colonists and settlements to officially start the French and Indian War. However, at this time, many tribes, such as some of the Iroquois tribes, were allied with the French in the war, while others made alliances with the British forces. The Iroquois tribes initially claimed themselves as neutral participants of the war, but they would later join opposing sides to exploit the other tribe, causing the Confederacy to officially be broken for the first time in over 200 years. French allies. Some of the tribes that allied with the French forces included the Huron, Algonquin, Montagnais tribes, and part of the Iroquois tribes. The French had gained their alliance with the Huron, Algonquin, Montagnais, and part of the Iroquois tribes because they had already established their fur trading with these tribes near the Canadian border in the areas of Ontario. Many of the French settlements for fur trading were temporary, which diminished the disputes for land with these local tribes, while they also exchanged for goods such as iron tools and kettles that were manufactured goods. Likewise, there was a pre-existing agreement between these group of tribes, along with the French and the French military, that had to help them in defeating the Mohawk tribe in exchange for their loyalty during the war. Other tribes, such as the Lenawek and Miami, who contributed less towards the war, were convinced to join the French during the war because they felt threatened by the British's colonial settlements encroaching onto their lands, while desiring a good relationship and network with the French. Now on to British allies. For the British had allied with part of the Iroquois tribes, Cherokee, Sandusky, Seneca, and the Way tribes. As the war had begun, many other tribes such as the Ottawas and the Wyandots had come to join on the war against Britain in order to capture booty and captives to take back home, just like the Battle of Fort Dunesque. Many tribes such as the Shawnee and Kickapoo would switch sides as the war advanced to see which side would provide the greatest economic advantage and who had the greatest chance of victory. When it came to the side of the British, allies such as the Cherokee tribe were won over before the French and Indian War, as the British colonists allied with their Native American counterparts to win the Tuscarora War. Tribes such as the Erie, Susquehannock, and the Wyandot sides with the British, as they were long enemies of the Iroquois tribes that sided with the French. Although the French dominated most of the fur trading with the Native Americans in North America, British fur traders such as William Johnson were able to convince their Native American traders to join their cause all throughout America. The war. Both the French and British forces supplied their respective Native American allies with gunpowder, ammunition, and guns in order to utilize their forms of guerrilla warfare to become more effective and efficient. During the war, the number of Native American casualties weren't exact, but during the major battles of the war, the Native Americans had lost nearly 3,000 men while fighting for the French, and nearly 1,500 on the side of the British, totaling to about 5,000 total deaths, with even more casualties. Now onto exposure to foreign European diseases. During the influx of many of the first settlers until the establishment of some of the first major colonies, Native Americans were exposed to many of the deadly foreign diseases brought by the European settlers from their motherlands, which devastated their people. Settlers coming from major countries in Europe such as Portugal, Spain, France, and England had experienced epidemics and the consequence of large-scale diseases such as smallpox, influenza, and measles that proved to be foreign entities to that of the Native Americans. Because the local Native Americans were never exposed to such diseases on any scale, they were not able to develop immunity to them over time as the Europeans did, causing such diseases to prove deadly in the manner of which they plagued the body and how communicable they were. Likewise, medicines and remedies were not available for such diseases in the Americas, since these diseases caused widespread destruction of the Native American population quickly before that. These major diseases included measles, smallpox, leprosy, malaria, typhus fever, typhoid, and gonorrhea, as they were unknown during the pre-contact period during the pre-Columbian era. Between the years of 1492 and 1650, with the population ranging anywhere from 8 to 20 million Native Americans in the North American continent, as the North American continent had lost a total of about 90% of their population of Native Americans, and it was majorly caused by the virgin soil epidemics, which were population encounters of diseases never before seen in these areas. Ever since the first Spanish voyagers arrived at the Caribbean islands under the guidance of Christopher Columbus, the current population of Hispaniola, modern-day Dominican Republic and Haiti, was approximately 4 million, as they had dwindled down to the 100,000 population mark in the year of 1508 due to diseases such as the prominent Spanish influenza. The very first disease to come to the Caribbean islands brought by Christopher Columbus was a specific variant of influenza known as the swine flu, which was initially brought by the pigs from the Santa Maria, Pinta, and Nina brought over to the New World. They released these pigs into the wild so that they could fatten up and be hunted again for a larger quantity of meat. Later on, in areas such as Hispaniola and Cuba in 1518 and 1519, typhus had also broken out along with smallpox, as they both made their way towards Mexico along with the Spanish settlers moving further inland. The Inca Empire had dominated this region and had to come into various encounters with the Spanish, directly causing an impeccable outbreak with a death rate of nearly 50% for all who had received it. Diseases like the European smallpox had found such a high rate of immunity amongst the Europeans, of which it originated from, because it was commonly found as a childhood disease with remedies to fight the disease if it got out of hand, so the immunity was built over a period of a lifetime into adulthood for the Europeans. Overall, throughout the Americas, the Native Americans had experienced a shock from European diseases throughout the age of exploration. The swine influenza and swine flu had a death rate of 25%, measles with a death rate of 25%, smallpox with a death rate of 40%, and typhus with a death rate between 10% and 40%. With such catastrophic conditions, the combination of mainly deadly diseases and conflicts with colonists would wreck the Native American population by nearly 90%. Conflicts and disputes with the colonists. Early conflicts with colonists. Similarly to diseases, conflicts and persecution by the European colonists in the North Americas became one of the main causes for the heavy decrease in the Native American population. When Christopher Columbus had initially left for the New World and arrived in the islands of Hispaniola, he had encountered the local tribes and brought back multitudes of prisoners of war back to the homeland. Ever since this encounter, the Native Americans have often gained the short end of the straw with their conflicts with the European voyagers and conflicts throughout the Age of Exploration. Many of the earliest British colonies in America, such as Jamestown and Plymouth Colony, had experienced constant conflicts with the indigenous native peoples. Many of these misunderstandings were from land disputes, societal differences, and language barriers. Looking at tribes such as the Algonquian tribes, which were one of the very first Native American tribes to make contact with the European settlers, they had experienced severe misunderstandings with the foreigners who had taken over parts of their land without asking. In their tradition, land is always given as a birthright, and it is the essence of their life, as they are heavily agricultural based. This means that such property cannot be sold to any other counterparts, which would cause severe turmoil with the European colonists. There are also major cultural differences and disputes between the two sides, since the Native Americans had mainly focused on hunting, trading, and carrying out other roles for the family, while the women were mainly responsible for farming and agriculture. On the contrary, the European settlers had all taken part in farming, no matter their sex, which caused serious confusion between the different groups of people. Also, due to the vast differences in languages all throughout the North Americas, it was nearly impossible for the European settlers to communicate with the Native Americans, which would cause frustration when communicating and could lead to some severe misunderstandings. The European settlers caused the majority of the issues for the Native Americans when they encroached on their lands. They began taking over land which is considered sacred to the Native Americans and had strongly displeased them. However, in various skirmishes throughout this time of settlement and expansion for the colonists, the Europeans always had the upper hand with more advanced weaponry and an already impacted Native American enemy that was nearly decimated as a result of foreign diseases upon their very contact. Just like the Algonquian tribes And just as the previously mentioned tribes, the Anasazi had also experienced similar casualties and experience with the colonists. Bacon's Rebellion and King Philip's War. Colonies such as the colonies in Virginia at the very beginning of the time period of colonial settlements in the North Americas had also shown many conflicts between the colonists and the Native Americans. Bacon's Rebellion was a strong example, as the colonists of Virginia wanted to escape from their existing governing regime and expand their territories westward. They were displeased with the lack of support they received from their government against the Native Americans that they were facing. Motivated to move westwards and expand their properties and territories, colonists sought to exterminate the Native American populations in these areas to do so. Major wars such as King Philip's War involved direct European and colonial attacks on Native American tribes, such as the Narragansetts, who experienced a major loss at one of the strongholds, in which they lost 700 men in a span of a few days and a total of 300 wounded, who would later die as well. This caused the tribe to never recover from such upsetting losses and eventually lose control of their Narragansett nation. Many Native Americans who were captured during the French and Indian Wars and during the majority of their persecution had died from many diseases during close confinement. Many other devastating forms of warfare were used on the Native Americans throughout the Age of Exploration. Many times, colonists would give luxurious coats and garments to the Native Americans that were coated with foreign European diseases that would later spread to the remainder of the tribe and eventually wipe out their populations. As a result of such persecution and domination of the Europeans over Native Americans, the Native Americans would eventually fall to the European might. Conclusion. Upon analysis of the different facets of the European involvement with the Native Americans during the Age of Exploration, it was evident that they were the root cause for the persecution and decline of the Native American population. Ever since the arrival of Christopher Columbus until the modern day, the persecution of Native Americans hasn't stopped. During the Age of Exploration, Native Americans died from intertribal warfare, conflicts during the French and Indian War, as they lost large portions of their population to foreign European diseases, and they even experienced centuries of persecution from conflict. However, this oppression has not stopped ever since, as Native American reservations have started to become encroached by industrial projects and necessities for land in the modern day United States. The Native Americans have lost serious numbers ever since their participation in the French and Indian War, which encouraged a split in many alliances and confederations. Many casualties were picked up by the Native Americans, and as they were later to find out that the colonists that once fought alongside of them seek to exterminate all of them to gain possession of their land westward. Also, as voyagers had gotten exposed to the Native Americans during their travels overseas, they incurred millions of lives lost to the foreign European diseases that plagued tribes entirely. These diseases were so foreign that the Native Americans had no immunity to them and would later experience high death rates. Last but not least, the conflicts with the colonists and settlers overall had led to such masses of killing and destruction. The colonists took over the Native Americans' land, dominated them in skirmishes, and eventually overtook them. As a result of the introduction of European settlers to the New World, the home of the Native Americans, this would spell the persecution of the indigenous people and a major downfall in their population, losing nearly 90% of their people. Hey guys, welcome back. So I hope you guys really enjoyed that video all about the causes of the Native American persecution, really going through with me on the entirety of the story, the timeline of Native Americans, and how they really suffered, and how we should actually look and shine a limelight on that. Even though it was a golden age of exploration with the colonists coming to the New World, the Americas, there was also many downsides, such as the Native American persecution. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This has been the eCoreAcademy e-learning platform. Please make sure to check out our website at eCoreAcademy.org. We have plenty of new note sheets, quizzes, and worksheets that go along with each and every single one of our videos, organized and free, personalized just for you. Also, email us at eCoreAcademy@gmail.com if you have any questions, and check out our social media accounts at Pinterest, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And go and check out those accounts, see what kind of interesting content we have there. Chuck us a follow there, and also use those mediums to share all of our videos to those who might find it interesting. Alright everyone, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This has been AJay Raj here at the eCoreAcademy e-learning platform, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace!